What up guys, Alex here again. Today we are working on my 89Z. It's been on the lift for a couple days now, just getting some needed work that I've been putting off, just kind of procrastinating it, but I'm finally getting around to it. So what we're doing today is actually just front wheel bearings. This is nothing necessarily performance oriented, this is more just maintenance if anything, but let me show you what I've been working on and give you guys a quick sneak peek of my new project. So what you're looking at here is just my front spindle with Power Tricks ultralight coilovers, and you know they're kind of like Brimbos here, a bit scratch on the top. But these are my 6-piston Brembo calipers from the CTSV 2nd gen. And now what I've done is I've welded a sensor for an ABS sensor so that I can take advantage of traction control. So I already got the rear diff set up, and the rear diff is a 370 Nismo GT Pro. And I'm utilizing one sensor out of the rear. Now for Mega Squirt, in order to have it take advantage of traction control, it just needs one sensor front and one sensor in the rear to set a correlation of front speed and rear speed. So again, you just need one sensor per axle, so to say. You don't need 4 sensors. So I got the 370Z sensor here, already bolted up, welded, ready to go. But when I put the spindle and the hub back together here, after I was done and I figured my bearings were good, it turns out they weren't good. They were actually very bad and notchy bearings. So when I put the hub back on and I was spinning it, it was like click, 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 it wasn't making noise, but you can feel it. It was very, very notchy. So I took it all apart and I hammered out the bearings, or I'm sorry, the races from the bearings. The bearings just slide out. Let me show you what that bearing looked like. And I kind of threw it back in my bin bearings and races and whatnot. It's down in here somewhere. Probably dropped all the way to the bottom. There it is. All right, so this was the front outer bearing for the hub. It's a tiny little guy. It's actually the bearing that goes right there, and you have your your dust cap that goes on top right there. So this was the bearing that was there, and check that out. It is not good looking. That's a lot of destroyed metal. It's supposed to be very smooth, like kind of like what you see right there, and it was not. So again, I like to keep these for my hydraulic press and as punch tools, so it's still usable for my purposes, but for a bearing purpose, nope, not good. So went ahead and got this hub done, and we're gonna do the other hub. No point in doing the work twice for a video representation here. So the bearings I like to use are Timken bearings. They are made in the US. They're a really good bearing. You can still get bearings from Nissan. They're kind of expensive. Per hub, you're looking at about $120, 120 bucks. So it would be like $240 total to do this. But from Rock Auto, these are like $5-6 bucks each. They're good cheap, not like bad quality cheap, but priced really well, and they're extremely good bearings. So I highly recommend these, or if you can get NTK, Koyo, or any other high durable brand name bearing, that's good. If you're in a pinch, maybe SKF or National bearings, those are pretty good too, but I rate these higher than SKF and National. Any of the bearing that you might see in Rock Auto, AutoZone, like even AutoZone's Duralast brand, I don't do it, guys. Just get the right quality bearing. You don't want to do this again. Additionally, if a bearing was to fail, it could potentially weld and seize itself to the spindle, and you can have an accident. You can be in a bad situation. So bearings are really important to get a good brand. Now, normally I love OEM parts, but I couldn't justify the $120 per hub. I just can't do that. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started on pulling the other hub off. Now again, this was the one that was bad. The bearings are bad. This is all good. It's already rebuilt. It's already the grease has already been packed, so we're good to go on that one and reinstall it. But I got the wheel off over here, and this thing is not as bad. This bearing is not bad at all. This one actually feels pretty good. But generally speaking, you don't replace one side. You want to do both at the same time. And it's not to say that that won't cause a problem if you were to do that, but in your mind, as far as like a checklist of things that you've done for your car, that front bearings were done on such and such date, such and such mileage. So I highly recommend doing both at the same time. So let's get that hub off. And I got the tools out already for this. You need a chisel to separate the dust cap. Obviously a hammer to do that. You need a pair of pliers to pull out the cotter pin, and then a 27 millimeter wrench there or a socket wrench there to remove the nut, the retaining nut, and then you'll need a torque wrench to put it back on. So let's go ahead and pull off that dust cap and get this process started. Now I apologize, it's not much lighting over here, but we're only just removing it from this side, so you'll be all right just to see how I do it here. So hit it, you'll feel it separate, and you just notice I'm doing light taps there, nothing super crazy hard. And then when you feel it's pulled away, mostly you can just get this or get a flat blade screwdriver and just kind of pry it off, and it'll come off relatively easy. You don't want to go crazy on it because there is an O-ring down there that seals it, and it's supposed to be true to a round shape. So I've been in here before. I probably just repacked the bearings because that's fresher grease. That's just generic high temp grease. So we will need to remove all the grease for sure. So what we're going to do is get a paper towel here ready just to put parts on it, just like how I did on the other one there. So we'll just put this here. Upside down to me means, like, that cap means it's clean, ready to go. If you look, it's already been cleaned out. So these are good to go. All right, so we got that off. Let's go pull off the cotter pin. And the cotter pin is right there in the middle. Drop the pliers. All right, cotter pin's right in the middle, and there's a million ways you can remove a cotter pin. I like to try to pull it out as it went in, meaning get the arm straight. You can simply, I suppose, cut it, and then you can have probably an easier time getting it out. But this is how I liked to do it, because I'm a little more methodical in my work for Z cars. It's definitely find me a little bit, but it'll go. So you can see I'm just kind of pushing it out. And then you can actually use leverage. So if you get your needle nose in there, and if you're able to get to the edge of the hub like I am, you can actually just pry it out like that. So it's now coming out. So the reason why I don't cut them is if you cut it and you don't see where the leg ends up. I mean, maybe you got stuck in the hub, maybe it ends up in there. I just don't like that idea. So I like to see the whole piece of cotter pin so I can just throw it away. So there is a lock, crown lock here for the nut. So I just remove that at the same time. And again, you need to clean these when you're redoing this, or actually whenever you pull off the hub, you got to clean it and put new grease on it. All right, and it's never a bad idea to, you know, keep your hands clean and wipe your tools off if they get greasy. So before I go remove the nut there, I'm just gonna go wipe it down so I can get as little grease inside the socket as possible. So I'm just kind of clean it up a little bit. All right. All right, let's go ahead and remove it. Now, this should not be on there very tight. It should be, the torque is 18 to 22 foot-pounds of torque. So it shouldn't be on there very tight at all. So I've actually, watch this, I've actually done it to where I can just do it by hand sometimes, and that one I couldn't. My hands are kind of greasy, but it shouldn't take much effort at all. If you saw that, it just came right off. Don't lose this nut, and especially don't lose the washer that's behind it. The washer's keyed. You see that channel right there, that key channel? The washer has to slide in there with that special key. So what I do is when you pull it off, grab it like this and pull it straight off like that. That way you catch it. And you also catch the bearing from falling out. And so just looking at the spindle here, it looks in good shape. It's just dirty, and you can see the mix of new grease and old grease. So now's a good opportunity to get all the grease out and put straight new grease in there, like you see in my new assembled hub there. So, all right. So let me adjust the camera a little bit. So like I said, we got to keep some, or go ahead and get the parts clean. I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now. So this is the old bearing. We're just gonna put this in the old bearing pile because I will save that bearing for a punch later or a press tool. Let's put that aside for a moment. And again, I should have clarified, these are turbo hubs, by the way. 87 through 89 turbos had these type of hubs, and what these allow a lot of guys to do is to put any Z32 or S14 or even 350Z brake upgrades. It just slides on a conventional slip-on rotor. 84 through 89 non-turbo rotors, I'm sorry, hubs, and 84 through 86 turbo hubs. They're all the same in that they're a pentagram type hub where you have to bolt on the rotor from the rear, and it uses the same bearings and everything, but it's more of a proprietary, like dedicated, you know, rotor setup to Nissan at the time. And it actually is just kind of like a leftover design, carryover design from the old Datsuns. So, you know, that's something, you know, we can talk about in another point in time about upgrades and BBKs, big brake kits. But you get the point there. The 87, 89 turbo hubs are most desirable for that brake upgrade. Some people can actually turn the rotor, turn the hub, like the lathe or something like that, and get it to look like, you know, bring it down to a circular style so you can slip on a rotor. So you can do that. If, you know, the turbo hubs are kind of hard to find, but that's always an option. So what I'm doing here, I'm just wiping off as much excess grease. I mean, you don't have to get it perfectly clean. You just want to wipe it all off in case there's like a large grit or something. And then in this one, the cap here, you just gotta scrape it all out with your finger and a paper towel there. So we'll put that aside and grab another one. I go through paper towels a lot because I like to constantly be wiping away grit and grime and grease. So I buy a lot of paper towels. And there's that O-ring I want to show you guys real quick. See that black O-ring right there? So you gotta be careful when you're taking these off not to nick and damage the O-ring. Otherwise you just need to find another one and put one on. All right, so that's pretty clean. Just wipe down the outside. And you don't need to get brake parts cleaner to remove all the grease. I mean, you're just gonna put grease right back on it. So you're just, again, wiping everything. And let's go ahead and throw these away real quick. All right, so next what we gotta do is we have to get the races out of here. There's a front bearing, or I guess an outer bearing and an inner bearing. And you got this old dust boot, or I'm sorry, dust seal on here. So you gotta get these out too. So, and also the seal is what holds back, or it doesn't really hold back, but you can't remove the inner bearing without pulling off the seal. So what I do is I just walk this over to my my vise. Actually, let me grab the new bearings since we're gonna be over there and everything. Yeah. And we're gonna go ahead and just do this all in the vise as my like anvil type situation. All right, you can see I've already been here. I got everything already laid out. So first things first, we need to get that that seal out, and it's pretty easy to do actually. So what I do is I just get the hub. Let me fix the camera a little bit. Get the hub kind of in there halfway and kind of angle it downwards like that. And you don't need to go all gorilla hands tightening it. You just need to get it kind of positioned. And then I just use another chisel punch and I just tap off the old seal here, and it just flies off pretty quick. You can already see it's coming off. Okay, so there it is, it's off. Let's kind of just pry it off for the rest of it. Okay, all right, so there's the old bearing. And I'll set that down for a minute. Let's pull this off. Okay. So you can look inside, you see that yellowish grease, yellowish brown, that's OEM grease from back in the 80s. Oh, and by the way, those bearings were the original bearings. They've never been replaced. So you got two races in there, like I said, an inner and an outer. And essentially you have to, when you get in there and you kind of clean things out, which is something you have to do, like that's disgusting, that's pretty old stuff. You'll see that there's two rectangular notches on opposing sides of the bearing races that gives you a window of opportunity to hammer out the the races. So there's all that grease there. And I mean, grease is grease. It does dry up over time, and I've seen grease that look like plastic. This is definitely on the thicker cake-like grease that I don't really think it was doing as much as it was supposed to back in the day. So this is more important at this point to make sure you get like 99.9% of all that old, I don't know if you can see it, all that old grease out of there, because I doubt its lubricating or coating properties are anywhere near the same as what they were, you know, 30, 40 years ago. So we're almost there. Definitely go through paper towels, wiping the stuff down. And again, I don't think you need to use brake parts cleaner to clean this out. You're just trying to remove most of it. So that way when you pack in new grease, you're getting a, you know, a clean start for the bearings and the spindle and all that fun stuff. All right, this is looking pretty good. Just a little bit more. And then once the races are out, you can do another thorough inspection of what is left over. So this is good for now. All right, so let's look inside. Maybe you can see, there it is right there. You can see it, that rectangular little opportunity, a little window there, channel. That's where you take a chisel and you pound it out. There's one on both sides, you know, front end or inner and outer, but on equal sides of each race. So you go left, right, and you basically, that's how you tap it out. So we'll go ahead and do the outer bearing. So just hammer away. And they're on there pretty good, especially being that these are the original. And I can see that's moving. I don't know if you guys can see yet. I doubt it. Yeah, it's slowly coming out. It's just a bad angle here. Let me see if I can switch it up. There we go. Definitely it takes time to get them out. Slowly but surely. Okay, there he goes. All right, I dropped that one. So there we go. That's the race for the outer bearing. And now we gotta get the inner. And it's the same deal. The race has the same notches for the inside. So we just gotta get this set up properly. All right, so it's kind of hard to get started. This one's coming out a lot easier than the front one, I can tell you already. There it goes. All right, let's have a look. Oh, it's a race. All right, so like I said, you get the old races and seals out. Go in there one last time with paper towels, and let's get all the grease out of there as best we can. Because it's pretty much like now or never. All right. So I'm getting my finger wrapped around the back of that edge for the race seat and wiping it down. See that? And then one more pass for the front. And this isn't like a lot of effort, guys, to do this. This is something that any Z31 owner, you know, should be able to do, unless you have like a physical limitation for how you can work on cars. Like my back right now is killing me. But okay, so we're ready for the installation of the new races here. So let's get those out. They're always packed so nicely in there. They're kind of lubed a little bit from factory, but not so much as like lube, as more of just rust preventative stuff. So here's the bearing. Set that aside for a moment. And then in my other video about the differential rebuild, on those races, I do talk about, you know, you want to give it a little bit of a greasy surface to get hammered in. So I use just a small dab of my cheaper grease and just give it like a small thin coating, just to give us a little bit of like a, you know, motivation, I guess, to get in. All right, so this one is kind of weird to install, only because they got the studs in the way. If you don't have your studs, this would be a whole lot easier. So what I generally do is I just get it started with a piece of wood and then finish it off with my race drive tool. So get a piece of wood like this and just go, just get it started like that. So there it is, started. Then now, I already got the drive tool here from my drive bearing kit. Now check this out. Let me show you how many different sizes this kit has. So many different sizes for so many different races there. I got this off of Amazon. I think it was like 30 bucks, maybe 40. But it's definitely one of those tools you gotta have around the shop. So this size here is a 44 millimeter. What you want to do is this needs to be a hair smaller than the actual race itself. So when you bring it up and you look at it, you can visually see it's a hair smaller. And the reason why you need to have a hair smaller, because this has to drive the race past the surface top there. So you kind of get it ready right there, get it kind of squared up, centered, and just drive it home. Kind of going at an angle, but it'll fix itself. There it goes. So now it's like the race is flush with the surface pretty much, but it still needs to go in deeper. There's a spot where it needs to land. So do you notice that audible tone difference? Like solid metal on metal? Well, that's how you know it's seated all the way. So then you check the race to make sure there's no marring. Your finger doesn't catch anything, so that's nice and smooth. And then you flip it over. And let's get the rear race installed. All right, so same thing as before. Oops, wrong one. Get your new race. Put that up there so it doesn't get dirty. All right, so let's put the parts bag over there. All right, so same thing as before, just get your cheaper grease. That grease right there is just a high temp from Walmart. I wouldn't recommend using Walmart high temp grease. It's an inferior quality of grease. I'm sure it meets and satisfies so many standards, but in my opinion, we'll get to the better temp grease here in a minute, but I recommend that if this is your investment, use a higher quality grease just because you can. All right, so because there's no obstacles in the way, I'm going to use a square piece of wood here to get it seated all the way to the flush mount surface, and then I'll finish it off with the race tool, the drive tool. So there it is. It's now flush with the top. So now what I'll do is swap out the disc here for a larger size. This is a 58 millimeter, if you want to jot that down. And this tool, this little screw here, is just a retainer. All right, so get it squared up, centered, and take it home. And you notice the audible difference? That one's done. All right, so before we put the seal on, you gotta put the bearing in here. The bearing goes in before the seal. So let's talk real quick about packing bearing grease. So this Mobil 1 fully synthetic grease here, this stuff is nice. I mean, it looks like frosting for a cake. This is good stuff. It's kind of expensive. I think this is like 15 bucks. AutoZone carries it. So use a good grease, guys. Don't cheap out on grease. This is your bearings that we're talking about here. So to pack a bearing that has no grease in it, even if you're trying to repack a bearing that has existing grease, you can use a tool that drives grease in here, or you can do it by hand. I like to do it by hand. That way I can see the end results. So get some grease, put on in your palm like this, and yes, it's great to wear gloves. And this is actually a procedure they have in the factory service manual, by the way. They tell you to do exactly this. So before I start, what I want you to take note of is on the back of the grease, on the back of the bearing, I'm sorry, you can see little windows here, right? You can see the back end of the roller bearings. Watch what happens when you, let me move my camera a little bit so you can see. Watch what happens when you roll the grease in there. Watch. See how there's grease coming out of the bearing window there? That's what you want to see. That's how you know the grease went all the way in. So again, you're just pushing hard and rolling the bearing into the grease in your palm. And this way you're packing the grease. And you want to do it a lot. And you'll see that this bearing will consume most of that grease I had just put in my palm. And yeah, it gets messy. And again, that's why you have gloves, hopefully. All right, so check that out. I'm fully confident that grease is packed all the way around the bearing rollers here. And so then what I do is I just go ahead and finish packing in the channel up top, making sure that there's not a dry spot on these bearings. So you don't want to have a bearing have a, like a dry start. You can create an instant amount of heat, a lot of heat, and then you don't want to get a flat heat hot spot on your bearings. So this bearing is fully packed, ready to go. So, I mean, you can pre-lube the race here if you want, but before you put the bearing there, what I recommend you do at this point in time is go ahead and start filling in the empty cavity of grease. Now, the reason why you want grease in here is as the wheel bearings get hotter and as things are rolling, the grease in here will get hotter and start to get more like liquid, to where it'll fling and continuously move in and out based on your driving activity. So like the faster you go, the more the bearing grease is going to fling out. But when you come down to a slower speed, it's going to come back in. So it's a continuous motion of grease flinging. So you want to make sure you pack a lot in there. And in my opinion, you can't go too much. You obviously don't want to put too much in there to where you have like a blowout from the seals, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to express here. So I go in there and I just pack it. Because again, you don't want to be too shy on the bearing amount here. It's, it's got to be ready and available in there for it to do its job. And if you think about how much I just put in there just now, that's probably a tad bit more than factory. I was being very generous there. So go ahead and put your bearing in there like that. Okay, get it in there. And then this is a good opportunity to either change out your gloves or wipe them down. This is where having disposable like latex gloves is probably better than these work gloves, because it'd be a lot cheaper and easier just to get rid of them. All right, so you kind of want to make sure you don't have any grease outside like this. So I just do a quick wipe down. Now, one thing I do before I put the seal on, you see that gap there, that excess area of no grease? I go in there and just kind of push more grease in there. because you don't want to be shy on grease here, guys. Just be very generous with your grease. Don't be stingy about it. Don't be Scrooge. I'm just going to put a little more in there. I mean, think about the amount of heat and friction and rotation here when you're going like, 80 miles an hour. If you're on a track doing about 100, 120, just think about how much movement and heat is being generated off those bearings, and you don't want to have any reason for a bearing to seize on you. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. All right, let's put that seal on. And the seal looks identical to the factory seal in every shape and way. Other brand seals, they look a little bit different. That's why I kind of like the Timken stuff. So the crush seal, that's what you're seeing. This is a metal, it crushes down and seals. That goes on the backside like this, right? So, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a race off of a differential, like a side bearing. And as I mentioned earlier, these are great drive tools. So put it on there like that. And send it home. Now it's installed. So that's ready to go. And I'll bring the grease back over to the spindle, but you want to, before you put your spindle on, you want to lube up the seal there, the lip of the seal. All right, so grease is packed in there. All you have left to do at this point is to pack the bearing in your palm, the other bearing. So same thing applies. Watch the windows on the side and just roll the bearing in your palm and pack it. And look, it just pretty much ate all that bearing, or that grease that was on my hand. It needs more, I can tell you right now. So fill her up. Cool. So just like the rear bearing, you want to just fill any cavity with grease just to prevent any possibilities of a dry issue. Cool. So I'm liking that. So pop that in there, let it just sit there, and then go ahead and fill the area just like you did on the rear bearing or the inner bearing. Just fill it in. All right, so that looks good to me. Okay, let's give my hands a good wipe down of that grease. And any grease that got on the hub, you want to wipe it off. If any got on the lug nuts, or I'm sorry, the lug studs, the wheel studs there, you don't want that to be on there for any reason. You don't want the lugs to separate or come off on their own. So what I like to do is just kind of just wipe it down, just the lip there, and then see if there's any grease elsewhere. And I think this is good, ready to go. So yeah, that looks good. So let's walk the grease back over. I'll clean this up when we're done, but let's go ahead and walk the grease over, because you need to apply grease on the spindle when you install it. And then you also need to pack grease in the dust cap. And there's a reason why, and I'll show you why. All right, so both of these are pretty much identical now in terms of readiness. But I forgot to show you guys, check this out. You can check out the token ring there. That's the ABS reluctor ring. So I got that from another make and model that I found the same diameter, and it did press on there, but just for added measure, I put the 4 weld tacks on there just to make sure it doesn't come off. So this is my front right hub, and that's going to be used for the ABS. So that's just cool that I'm able to do that. Okay, so we are ready to install the hub, and I'll show you what you need to do as far as the bearing preload and whatnot. But before we do that, we got to go inspect and clean off the spindle here. So again, poor lighting, I apologize, but there's a ton of grease on here that's old. I see a mix of my newer red grease that was there and some of the old yellow that had turned brown from contamination. So wipe off as much as you can. This case, it might not be a bad idea to get some brake parts cleaner if you want some, but I won't bother because I'm going to do a pretty good job with it. Just a paper towel here. Okay, let me go grab one more paper towel and that should be good. Now, if you just noticed, I just removed grease off the spindle, right? You gotta put that grease back on there with new grease. That's why you have to pre-lube it. Okay. So, that's looking clean. Let's give it a good old wipe down, a little bit of paper towel dust. Cool. Ready to go. So, same as before. Put some grease on there. Now you don't need to go overkill with this on the spindle, but be generous. You know, don't be shy on this. So, you know, that looks pretty good on as far as the top there. And you want to make sure that you're not going to have a dry spot. So do your best just to give a thorough, even coat all the way around. So that looks good to me. Okay, now remember I said about the rear seal, you gotta take a little bit of grease and put a little bit on the seal itself. And the reason why you do that is you need to make sure that the seal seats properly. So giving it a little bit of lubrication allows that to happen. So, and it's okay to get a little bit of grease back there. Just wipe it off, like on the outer lip. You only need to do it on the inner lip. So this lip right here, it won't do anything bad other than might be getting a little like dust collection because grease attracts dust. So just kind of just wipe off the excess there. There we go. Cool, so this is ready to go. So what we'll do is I'll get my washer and my nut here, and you just want to put the nut on by hand. So it just goes straight on. Make sure you hold, just like you took it off, hold the front like that to where the washer doesn't come off. And you saw the excess grease that kind of popped out. That's okay. Go ahead and use that same grease and smear it around because that's good stuff. Okay, so that is pretty much there. Like I said, the channels on top with the washer, it doesn't really matter which way it goes on, but you can see on the washer, I'm not sure in the video, you can see a ring. Well, that was made against the bearing, so we're just going to put it right back where it was. And then you go ahead and hand thread that nut there. Okay, so the factory service manual says 24 to, 18 to 22 foot-pounds of torque. Sorry, I had to think about that for a second. So we'll go ahead and swap this over. Oops, did not mean to do that. So I'm using my smaller torque wrench just because it has a smaller amount of torque rating. So traditionally what I do when I'm installing the hub bearings is well, first thing you need to do is once you get it on, spin it by hand to loosen any binding. And sometimes grease can give you an artificial amount of resistance. So when you spin it for a good amount of time, you're kind of spreading that load of grease. So like I said, it was 18 to 22. You can do that easily just by your hand here. Now, normally what I do is once I get this on, like I'll get it on to where it's tight, and I'll back it off and do like a 16th turn. So in my opinion, that was a little too much. So let me back it off a little bit, and you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to go left with a torque wrench unless you have a reverse thread. So here's what I used to do. I used to get it to where it's tight. Let's see. Hold on. Okay, that felt kind of weird because there's so much new grease in there. Like I said, you're just getting a lot of resistance. All right, so what I normally do is I'll get the hub nut here all the way, like kiss with your pinky, right? With your pinky, get it tight, and like that's tight now. And then just make sure it's on there like that. And I just do a little bit of like a 16th turn like that. And then to me, that's done. But I'm gonna look to see if that was anywhere close to the 18 to 22 foot-pounds of torque. Let's find out. No, but the thing is, so that's 20, that was 21 and a half. Yeah, that feels good. So in this case, defer to the factory service manual, guys. I think I was getting a false reading by hand because of the new grease I packed in there, but this feels right. It's tight. It feels way too tight, but that's because there's new grease. And when you think about when you get the wheel and hub, I'm sorry, the rotor and the wheel on there, it's gonna move easier because you have a lot more leverage, outer diameter leverage. So you got that on there, nice and tight, well, factory tight. And all that's left to do is you gotta put that crown retainer on there with the new cotter pins. So let's see, I have a various allotment here. Those are all, in my opinion, too big. Here's a smaller pack. All right, you know what? We're gonna use the big one. I don't like those because they were seemingly too thin. So we'll use the smallest size here. And let's go ahead and, so you just put it on, doesn't matter. And then the cotter pin goes only one direction. I go back to forward, so install it from the rear forward, if it will let me because of the teeth of the retainer. So the teeth of retainer is kind of blocking me, so it needs to rotate one. There we go, that's better. All right, so just how I'm not sure if you caught note of how it was before, but what I do is I'll do like a circular pattern like this, where you wrap it around. And there's a reason why I recommend you do that. Not only is that the factory way, but let me show you another part of this design here that a lot of people, I think, fail to recognize. Okay. So, last thing I told you guys, you got to pack here with grease. Let me show you why. If you notice, the theme here is I'm not being very stingy on the grease. Okay, so get it kind of like about half filled in there with grease. What happens when you put this on, let me get my mallet now. Don't use a hammer because you can damage the top there and like deform it. Just use a mallet. Doesn't take much to put it on. So why it's important to pack the cap and why is it important to have the cotter pin like that is as this hub is spinning, the cap will spin as well, and the grease that's in there will be stirred like a mixer with this cotter pin and the crown hat there, the retaining crown there, and that'll keep things circulating as far as getting things just continuously circulating. If you didn't have a cotter pin like that, there's a lesser chance of things mixing and stirring in there. So let's go ahead and pound it on there. That's it. That's it, guys. So I hope this was educational to you guys. It's not very hard or challenging. It's not rocket science, but it's something that I feel in fear that people don't do correctly, and they either don't put the amount of grease in there they should, they use inferior bearings, they don't drive in the race properly. There's a lot of things that I've seen online on Facebook and through the forums of people doing things improperly. So yes, there is a correct way of doing it, and there's definitely wrong ways of doing it. But in my opinion, what I just did was pretty much probably the same way they did it back in the day in the 80s at the dealership. So that's it. So I'll get that one put on. I might as well do it right now, but you guys don't need to check that out. We'll go ahead and call the video done for the day. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, comment away. Again, I hope you guys found this informational. So all right, guys, take it easy and have a good one. All right, so we're still here at the hub. I haven't even driven the car yet, but I forgot to do something per the factory service manual. I can't believe I completely forgot it. But what you need to do is, after you torque the bearing down between that 18 and 22, and I did 21.5, which is fine, you need to, per the factory service manual, you need to loosen it by some 60 degrees. I completely spaced this, and so luckily I haven't driven the car. I was working on other things. So if you look at a clock, right, like a good old faced clock here, you got 12, 3, 6, and 9. So at every, if you don't know where 60% lies, think about a clock, right? So from 12 to 3, that's gonna be 90%. From 3 to to 6, that's also gonna be 90%. So 45 is in the middle, which is right about here if you look at it. So you need to go past a little bit if you're gonna be doing it this way. You need to slightly go past 45 degrees to get to that 60%. They do have those cards that give you a degree reference. I don't have one. I've really never needed one. So if you think about this right here, right? So this is my, let's see if I can get it better actually. Nah, it is what it is. So we'll do it like that. So this is my 6 o'clock, right? So 3 o'clock is going to be right about 90 degrees, so right about here. So 45 is going to be right down here roughly. So you need to go past the 45 ever so slightly. So go past it like that. And that's where the torque needs to be. I didn't really feel any different in terms of turning here, but now it's set correctly, right? So that's all you need to do. And then you can put your crown cage lock, cotter pin lock set up here, and we'll go ahead and do that real quick since I got it pulled off the bench, or put on the bench here. So we're done here. So again, we got the bearing dust cap there, still filled with the RTV. We got this your lock cage nut deal. So let's go ahead and lock this back up. So what could have happened, right, if I had drove like that? Nothing. I mean, it would have drove just fine, but you could prematurely wear out that bearing, and it's just not designed to be at that tight of a specification. So I can't believe I missed that, but it's okay. It's okay admitting that I screwed up, but at least it was caught and rectified, right? So no harm, no foul in this case, which is good. But that's it. So let's get this cotter pin set just like how we had it before. And here we go. Again, I like to curve it around as best as I can to ensure that it stays where it needs to stay. There, I'm good with that. All right, so let me get my mallet so I can put this cap back on. But again, don't use a hammer, guys. Just use a mallet. You don't want to ding the dust cap any worse than it may already be. And there it is. So anyway, I just wanted to come back and fix that to correct an error that I made. Again, not a big deal, but now it's ready to go. So, all right. If I didn't say it before, please like and subscribe, comment away, blah, blah, blah. I appreciate any and all support you guys do for me on this YouTube channel. And I hope that you guys learn more and more about the Z31 if you've just gotten one and you're working on it, etc. So, all right, guys, that's all I got for now. Take care.